In the ancient village of Osuba, where red earth shone beneath the bright sun and tall baobab trees whispered secrets to the passing wind, a young mother named Nia lived with her daughter Abeni in a small hut made from clay and woven grass there. Home stood near the edge of the great forest, a place where spirits walked freely under the moon, and where elders said every sound carried the voice of an ancestor. Nia lived a quiet life, but quiet things can hide deep storms and the storm around. Her began the day her sister Mala returned from the mountains. Mala was a healer, a woman known for gathering strange herbs from places where even hunters feared to step. She walked with a staff carved with symbols older than the memory of any elder. And she carried a calabash filled with powders that shimmered in the firelight like the dust of stars. When Mala arrived, she smiled wide and spoke gently, but the air around her felt heavy like the moment before rain. Mala said she had learned new ways of healing, new mixtures gifted to her by spirits who lived in the hidden valleys of the far mountains. She said these medicines could cure faintness, weakness, nightmares, and wandering thoughts, and though her voice sounded warm, her eyes carried a shadow that made Abeni cling to her mother's cloth the first night. Mala stayed. She prepared a small clay bowl of thick, dark liquid. She said it was for Abeni to grow strong. Mala dipped her fingers into the liquid and pressed it on the child's tongue, and Abeni swallowed, though fear flickered in her eyes. Nia hesitated, but she trusted her sister, for Mala had healed her many times since childhood. So she allowed it. Mala continued giving Abeni the strange medicine every night, and every night Abeni became quieter. Her laughter faded, her steps slowed. She no longer played with the village children. She no longer chased fireflies at dusk. Her small face turned pale, and her eyes looked distant, as if she listened to voices no one else could hear. One night, when the drums of the village echoed across the plains, and the moon rose large and bright, Abeni whispered to her mother that she did not want the pills anymore. She begged Nia to stop her aunt from giving them. She said the medicine made the world spin and made shadows move in the corners of her room. She said she heard someone calling her name with a voice that sounded like a cold wind passing through dry leaves. Nia felt a chill crawl across her skin, for in the stories of old, when a child began hearing voices after taking a forbidden herb, it meant the spirit of the herb was entering the child's mind, trying to claim a home within her. Yet Nia still tried to trust her sister, for Mala insisted everything was normal. She said the girl was adjusting to the strength of the herbs, but the words did not feel true, and Abeni kept weakening the next morning. Abeni refused to open her eyes. She only whispered to her mother with a trembling voice. She said she had dreamt of a woman with long white hair and skin like ashes who stood beside her mat in the night. The woman touched her chest and said the medicine was hers, and that Abeni must keep taking it. Nia understood that something ancient and dangerous had followed her sister from the mountains. She carried her daughter to the great healer of the village, an old man named Elder Rafuru, whose beard reached his chest, and whose hut was always filled with smoke from burning sage. He listened to the child, tried to speak with the spirits, then looked at the strange pills Mala had brought and shook his head slowly. He said he had never seen medicine like this. He said the herbs in them smelled of the mountain of silent spirits, of forbidden ground, where no human was meant to gather anything, for it was said that the spirits there did not bless healers, but claimed them. Nia felt fear coil tighter inside her heart. Elder Rafuru told her to take Abeni to the Riverlands healer, the one who lived far beyond the plains, a healer who spoke directly with ancestor spirits. Nia wrapped her daughter in a cloth and began preparing for the journey, but Mala appeared at the doorway, her eyes glowing with anger and something else, something almost inhuman. She said the child did not need any healer. She said the medicine was doing exactly what it was meant to do. Her voice shook the air like the growl of an unseen beast. She stepped closer and reached for the sleeping child, but Nia pulled back. Mala stared at her with a gaze that felt like cold fire. She warned Nia that taking the girl away would break the pact, Then she turned and walked into the forest, her staff tapping the ground like a heartbeat, fading into darkness. Nia felt the wind shift. The forest grew silent as though holding its breath, and the crackle of distant fire seemed to whisper warnings that no human tongue could speak. Later that day, Nia carried Ebony on her back and walked toward the healer across the plains, but before she reached the older paths, a whisper echoed behind her. It was soft yet sharp. Like a blade through grass, she turned and saw a thin trail of ashes forming on the ground behind her, as though something burned with invisible flames and followed her. Footsteps. Ebony shivered against her back, whispering to her mother that the white-haired woman was walking behind them. Nia hurried through fields where tall golden grasses brushed her legs. She moved past termite mounds and old abandoned shrines. She crossed a shallow river where spirits flickered beneath the water like pale fish, and she felt as though the world itself watched her every step. By the time she reached the small hut of the Riverlands healer, the sun was low and a warm orange light draped the land. The healer was a tall woman with skin the color of deep ebony and eyes filled with ancient. Knowing her name was Iremba, she listened to Nia, looked at the child, touched the strange pills, and inhaled a long breath. She said, "These herbs were not for human healing." She said they were used in the rituals of binding, where a spirit is tied to a living host. She said the one who gave the herbs must have entered a pact with a restless spirit. Nia felt the world tilt. The healer said the spirit wanted a new vessel, and Mala had brought the herbs from the Forbidden Mountains to feed it. She said Ebony was slowly becoming the new vessel, and time was almost gone. As Iremba spoke, the flames of her fire danced wildly, though no wind touched them. The air thickened. Ebony moaned in her sleep, whispering that the white-haired woman was inside the hut. Nia held her daughter, trembling, as the healer chanted words older than the stones of the earth. She said, "The child must be taken to the ancient doctor of the inner valley before the next moon rose, for only he could reveal the full truth about the herbs and the pact that Mala had made." The healer lifted Ebony gently and placed her on a mat. She told Nia that if she wanted to save her daughter, she must leave before dawn, for the spirit would chase them. Nia agreed, though fear wrapped her heart. She sat beside her daughter, watching her chest rise and fall weakly. She wondered what the doctor would reveal, wondered what truth hid in the strange herbs, wondered what pact her sister had made with the spirits of the Forbidden Mountains. And as night settled thick and heavy around the hut, Nia held her daughter close, praying to ancestors for strength for the journey that awaited her. The night around the hut of Iremba grew heavy, like a thick blanket pressed against the earth, and Nia sat awake, holding her daughter close, while the healer prepared for the journey ahead. The fire flickered with strange colors, blue, green, and pale gold, as those spirits gathered within its light, watching, listening, waiting. Ebony slept, but her breathing was shallow, her skin cold as river stones, and her small fingers twitched as if fighting something unseen in her dreams. Nia felt fear rising inside her like dark water, but she also felt resolve, because the healer had said the ancient doctor of the inner valley was the only one who could reveal the full truth and bring hope to the child. So Nia would not stop. She would cross forests and plains. She would march through darkness. She would face spirits. If she had to before dawn, the healer woke her and gave her a gourd filled with river water mixed with a protective herb. She said the water must be given to Ebony whenever she cried out in fear. She said it was the only thing that could calm the spirit that tried to pull her deeper into its realm. Iremba stepped outside into the early breeze and raised a hand toward the sky, chanting a blessing for the journey. The air trembled, and the tall grasses around the hut bent in the same direction, as though bowing to unseen ancestors when the first light of morning brushed the edge of the world. Nia tied her daughter to her back, wrapped tightly in cloth, and began walking with Iremba toward the path that led to the inner valley. The land stretched before them, wide and golden, the sky pale with the waking sunbirds. called from treetops, sending echoes across the savannah, but beneath those peaceful sounds there was a strange tension, like the land itself knew danger followed them. They walked past clusters of giant trees whose roots twisted like ancient fingers, gripping the soil. They crossed streams where water spirits shimmered beneath the surface, and they felt a faint chill each time they stepped across the wet stones at midday. Ebony stirred on her mother's back, whispering that someone was calling her name, telling her to follow the voice. Nia poured a little river water into her mouth, and the child fell silent again, but the silence did not comfort Nia, for she felt a cold breath brush the back of her neck, as though something walked too close. Iremba noticed her shiver and said she felt it too. She said the spirit that haunted them grew stronger the farther they went from the village, because this was the open land where spirits roamed freely without the protection of shrines or sacred drums. They reached the Great Red Hill, a place where wind always moved in circles, carrying the scent of dust and wildflowers. At the top, they paused to rest, and Naya looked back toward the path from which they had come. She expected to see only grass and horizon, but instead, she saw a faint trail of white ashes swirling along the ground, slowly moving. Like a snake in the sand, she gasped, and Iremba followed her gaze. The healer narrowed her eyes and said the spirit was close. Too close, she said. They must move faster and reach the forest before sunset, for the forest, though filled with spirits, was protected by the ancient trees who stood guard over travelers who carried pure intentions. They hurried down the hill. Ebony whimpered faintly, and Nia pressed her cheek against her daughter's head, whispering that she was safe, even though fear drummed inside her chest. As they reached the outer edges of the forest, long shadows wrapped around their feet like dark vines, but the trees seemed to hum as though greeting them. Leaves rustled, though no wind blew, and small glowing insects drifted between the trunks, forming tiny paths of pale golden light. The healer nodded and said the forest recognized their purpose, but it would not keep the spirit out for long. As they walked deeper, the trees rose higher, blocking the sun, until the world around them dimmed into a dusky green. Ebony opened her eyes, half awake, half dreaming. She whispered that the white-haired woman was singing, and that the song felt like hands pulling her. Iremba stopped and reached into her bag, pulling out a handful of ground herb. She blew it into the air, and the powder swirled around Ebony, settling into her hair. The girl's breathing eased, but Nia felt tears burning in her eyes, watching how much her child struggled to stay in this world, while something dark dragged her toward another realm. They moved deeper, the forest filled with sounds of distant drums, echoing from hollow trees, and strange calls of night birds. Though the sun was still above the horizon, the deeper they went, the more it felt like walking into an ancient memory, a place where time moved differently. The path became narrow, and twisted roots stretched across the ground like giant serpents. Coiled in rest at one point, the forest grew silent, too silent. The air thickened, and Naya heard a faint whisper right beside her ear. Though no one stood there, the whisper said, "Give her to me." Nia stumbled forward, clutching her daughter tightly. Iremba stepped closer, chanting under her breath, her voice low and steady like the hum of the earth. She said the spirit tried to break the mother's resolve. She said they must not answer its voice. Nia kept walking, though her legs trembled. The trees seemed to press closer, as if trying to shield them. The air ahead shimmered faintly like heat rising from stone, and they stepped into a small clearing where the sunlight touched the ground again. The healer said they would rest, but only for a moment. Nia sat on a fallen log, holding Ebony, whose eyes fluttered open. She looked at her mother and tried to speak, but only a weak sound came out. She lifted a shaking finger, pointing at something behind Nia. Nia turned slowly, and her heart froze, because at the edge of the clearing stood a tall, pale figure with long white hair drifting like smoke, her skin grayish and cracked like ancient clay, her eyes empty, hollow yet burning with cold hunger. The white-haired woman did not walk. Instead, she glided forward, her feet never touching the earth. The trees behind her bent away as if Fearing her presence, Irumba stepped between them, lifting her staff and chanting louder, but the spirit only tilted its head, watching. Ebony, with a slow, unsettling movement like a predator studying prey, the spirit reached out a hand, thin and long. As a branch, the air around it grew cold, making the leaves tremble. Nia felt Ebony tightening her grip around her mother's cloth, whispering not to let her take me. Irumba threw a handful of burning herb into the air, and the smoke burst into a bright blue flare. The spirit recoiled, hissing, though no mouth moved on its face. The sound shook the clearing, vibrating through the trees. Then the spirit faded back into the shadows, but Nia knew it had not left. It followed. It waited. It would strike again. When weakness opened a door, Irumba urged Nia to rise. They had to reach the inner valley before nightfall because the spirit grew strongest in darkness. They left the clearing, quickly moving through dense undergrowth where vines brushed their legs, and the ground felt soft and ancient, like the skin of an old beast. At last, near the base of the forest, where land dipped into a wide valley, they reached a rocky path lined with old carving, symbols of protection etched by ancestors long gone. The healer touched one of the carvings and said they were near the entrance to the inner valley. She said the ancient doctor lived beyond a narrow gorge, where only those guided by purpose could pass, but she warned Nia the spirit would try one final time before they reached safety. As they stepped onto the stone path, the wind howled through the trees, though the air had been still moments before. Ebony cried out, clutching her mother's cloth. She said the white-haired woman was waiting ahead. Nia felt shivers crawl across her skin. She tightened her arms around her daughter and stepped forward anyway. The sky darkened, though evening had not yet come. The wind twisted into voices whispering her name, calling to Ebony, promising peace, promising rest, promising to end the pain. Nia shook her head, refusing to listen, but Ebony trembled, and for a moment her eyes rolled back as though the spirit tried to pull her out of her body. Nia cried out, calling her daughter's name and pressing her to her chest. Irumba grabbed Nia's arm, guiding her toward the gorge. Ahead, a narrow passage between towering rocks that seemed to hum with power, but before they reached it, the air behind them cracked like breaking stone. The white-haired woman appeared again, closer than before, her empty eyes fixed upon Ebony, her body drifting forward with cold determination. Nia screamed for help, and the wind carried her cry across the valley, echoing against the rocks, as if ancestors themselves heard her plea. The spirit reached out its hand, stretching long and shadowy, toward the child, but just as it touched the space before them, the ground trembled, and a deep echo rose from the gorge, a sound ancient, heavy, powerful, like the heartbeat of the earth itself. The spirit hesitated, and Nia clutched her daughter, stepping into the mouth of the gorge as the rocks lit with faint glowing lines. The spirit hissed again, its form flickering blue and white. Then it retreated into the darkness, watching with burning hunger as Nia and the healer disappeared between the protective stones. At last, inside the gorge, Nia fell to her knees, holding Ebony, shaking with fear and exhaustion. Irumba placed a hand on her shoulder, telling her they were close, very close. She said the ancient doctor would reveal the truth soon, and whatever that truth was, it would leave Nia forever changed. The gorge swallowed them in deep shadow as Nia followed Irumba. Along the narrow, stony path, the air inside felt different, older, thicker, as if it held memories of ancient spirits who once walked here. The walls rose high on both sides, marked with carvings of faces, animals, and swirling shapes that glowed faintly whenever Ebony breathed too shallow. The light flickered with each rise and fall of her chest, as though the valley itself watched her carefully. Nia felt a chill, knowing the carvings were not simple art, but guardians created by those who lived long before her time, guardians who could sense the presence of a wandering spirit, and who now sensed the shadow that had been pursuing her child. Irumba walked ahead, her staff tapping rhythmically against the stone. The sound echoed through the gorge, carrying a strange calm with it. She led Nia through twisting passages where the light dimmed, and the ground dipped as though descending into the belly of the earth. Ebony whimpered. Softly, her voice thin like a thread stretched too far, she whispered that the woman with white hair was calling to her, saying the valley could not save her, saying she belonged to the mountains. Nia whispered comfort, pressing her daughter close. But fear gnawed at her heart, because every time Ebony spoke, her voice sounded more distant, as though she drifted between worlds. They walked until the narrow walls opened into a wide hollow filled with warm golden light. A massive stone stood in the center, carved with symbols that spiraled and curved like the patterns of ancient snakes coiling around sacred drums. Arimba placed her hand on the stone, and the ground trembled gently. Then she motioned for Nia to sit. The healer knelt beside Ebony, touching her forehead and murmuring words old as riverbeds. She said they must wait for the ancient doctor who lived deeper within the valley. She said the doctor would come only when he sensed their presence and their need. Nia watched the healer, but her eyes kept drifting to the far end of the hollow, where a thin mist rose from cracks in the earth. Shadows moved behind that mist, slow and tall, like figures walking through another world. She held Ebony close, fearing that one of those shadows could be the white-haired spirit waiting quietly for her moment to strike. The air grew warmer, then cooler, then warm again, as if the valley breathed like a living thing. The stone carvings glowed brighter around them, their light soft but watchful. The golden glow turned into a faint shimmer, and soft footsteps echoed through the hollow. Nia held her breath, and the healer rose. Slowly bowing her head, an old man emerged from the mist, his back bent, but his presence enormous, his skin dark and wrinkled like the bark of an ancient tree, his hair long and braided with tiny bones and colored beads. His eyes glowed with a soft blue light, as though he carried the reflection of the spirit world within them. He walked with a carved staff topped with the skull of a small animal, and every time he touched the ground, the stone hummed in response. Arimba lowered herself and spoke with deep respect, calling him ancestor, doctor, guardian of the inner valley. The old man looked at Nia, then at the child. He breathed deeply, the air around him forming a soft spiral, as though drawn to him like smoke drawn to fire. He asked Nia to lay Ebony on the stone platform beside them. Nia hesitated, afraid to let go, but the healer nodded, assuring her, so she gently placed her daughter on the flat, warm surface. The ancient doctor placed both hands above the child, without touching her. His eyes closed, and for a moment the valley fell silent. Even the wind outside seemed to pause. After a long breath, he spoke, his voice deep, calm, and carrying weight. He said the child carried the mark of a mountain spirit, a spirit that hungered for a vessel because its own had grown weak. He said Mala, Nia's sister, had traveled to the Forbidden Mountains, not to heal, but to seek power, and in doing so, she made a pact with a restless spirit, one that had been trapped for years in the swirling mists of the mountain peaks. When Mala brought the herbs down, she carried the spirit with her. He said the medicine given to Ebony was a binding mixture used in old rituals, where a living soul is softened, weakened, made open for a wandering spirit to step in. The doctor said Mala herself was already too bound to the spirit, and the spirit needed someone younger, pure, easier to claim. Nia's heart twisted with grief and shock as she realized her own sister had offered her daughter to a mountain spirit. He asked if Mala had changed when she returned from the mountains, and Nia remembered the shadow in her eyes, the strange heaviness of her presence, the anger that did not sound human. She nodded, trembling. The doctor touched Ebony's chest just lightly. The air above her rippled like heat over fire. He said the spirit already touched her heart and mind. It pulled her dreams. It whispered into her waking moments. It tried to shape her spirit into a home for itself. Nia asked if her daughter could be saved. Her voice cracked with fear. The doctor nodded slowly, but his gaze became serious. He said it was possible, but the cost would be great because the spirit would not release its claim easily. He said the bond was half complete, and breaking it meant waking the spirit. fully confronting it, forcing it back to its realm. He said the valley gave protection, but not enough to shield them during the ritual, he said. The spirit would come, and it would fight. The ground shook softly, as though responding to his words. The light around the carvings flickered, the air chilled. Ebony opened her eyes weakly and whispered that the white-haired woman was standing behind the doctor. Nia looked, but saw nothing but mist, though she felt the presence. Heavy, cold watching, waiting, the ancient doctor stepped back and reached into a woven bag. He removed a small wooden bowl, a carved bone, and a bundle of dried leaves. Tied with red string, he placed the leaves in the bowl, crushed them with the bone, and whispered old words. The smell that rose was sharp and earthy, mixed with something faintly sweet like sap from a sacred tree. He painted a line of the mixture across Abinus' forehead, chest, and palms. Her small body shuddered. The doctor told Nia that the child had been resisting the spirit with all her strength, that her cries, her fear, her refusal of the pills were signs. She fought hard for her own soul. He said it was the reason she had not already fallen completely into the spirit's hold. Iremba asked what must be done. The doctor said they must begin the unveiling, a ritual that revealed the truth behind the pact. He said the doctor would speak to the spirit, call it forth, see the full depth of the connection, and decide how to sever it. Nia felt dread coil inside her. She did not want the spirit to come. She did not want to see its full form, but she would do anything to save her daughter. The ancient doctor began chanting slowly, his voice deep, resonant, echoing through the hollow. The carvings on the walls glowed brighter, swirling with movement as though alive. The mist at the far end of the hollow thickened, swirling, rising, forming shapes long and twisting. The air dropped to an icy cold. Ebony suddenly arched her back, her mouth opening in a silent cry. Nia lunged forward, but Iremba held her back, saying the ritual had begun. The ground trembled. A faint wail echoed through the gorge, like the cry of a creature waking from a long sleep. Nia felt the hairs on her arms rise. The mist thickened, forming a tall, slender figure as pale as bone. The long white hair drifted in unseen wind, her eyes hollow dark, her presence suffocating. She stepped out of the swirling air, her form flickering between solid and ghostly. The white-haired spirit looked down at Ebony with hunger and longing. Nia tried to rush forward, but the healer held her firm. The doctor raised his staff and spoke with a voice that carried the strength of many ancestors. He called the spirit by a name Nia had never heard, a name that sounded like cracking ice and rolling thunder. The spirit froze its head, tilting slowly toward the ancient doctor. The hollow filled with cold wind. Though no leaf moved, the spirit opened its mouth, though no lips parted, and a voice slipped out, thin, sharp, echoing like distant screaming. It said the child was promised. It said Mala had given her willingly. It said the pact had been sealed on the mountain peak in the blood red light of dawn. It said the child was the new vessel. Nia felt her heart break, hearing how easily her sister had given her daughter to such darkness. The doctor stepped closer, his staff glowing faintly. He said no spirit could claim a living child without the mother's consent. He said Mala had no right. He said the pact was broken the moment Nia refused the medicine. The spirit screamed a sound that stabbed the air. Abinus' body shook violently, as if the scream stabbed through her too. Nia cried out, calling her name, but the doctor raised a hand, telling her to stay strong. He said the unveiling was not over. A swirl of cold air wrapped around the stone platform. Shadows rippled across the ground, and the spirit began to transform its body, stretching, twisting, becoming larger. Darker, its eyes burning with blue fire. Nia stared in terror, knowing this was only the beginning. The doctor raised his staff high, preparing for what must come next, and he said the truth of Mala, the spirit, and the child was far worse than Nia imagined. The hollow shook as the spirit stretched into a towering shape, its long limbs bending like branches caught in a violent storm. Its white hair whipping through the air, though no wind touched it. The ground trembled beneath Nia's knees, and the ancient carvings on the walls pulsed with bright light as if trying to contain the force entering the valley the ancient doctor kept. His staff raised his voice, growing stronger, deeper, filled with an old power that pushed against the rising darkness. Ebony cried out, her small body arching as though invisible hands pulled her from all directions. Nia reached for her, but Irumba held her again, whispering that to touch the child during the unveiling would give the spirit more strength. Nia could only watch helplessly as her daughter trembled on the stone platform, her breath shallow, her small fingers curled tightly against her chest. The spirit let out a cold sound that slid through the hollow like icy water. It formed words, broken, twisted, but clear enough for Nia to understand. It said Mala had offered more than a child. She had offered blood and memory and future, it said. Mala had not simply taken herbs from the mountain, but had given part of her own soul in exchange for power, it said. Mala had bound herself to the spirit willingly, and therefore the spirit had the right to choose a vessel. Nia's heart clenched as she remembered her sister before the mountains. Bright, laughing, full of warmth, she wondered what had twisted her into someone who would give her niece to a hungry spirit. The doctor stepped forward, his staff glowing brighter, the blue light swirling around the carved skull. He said the law of spirits was older than the law of humans, but even spirits must obey the balance, he said. No pact could override the blood of a mother. The spirit shrieked, shaking. The air, the stone beneath them, cracked in thin lines that glowed faintly. The hollow darkened. The mist thickened, turning into swirling shadows that wrapped around the spirit like a cloak. Nia felt pressure pushing against her chest, her breath growing heavy as though the spirit itself pressed down on her. The doctor slammed the bottom of his staff against the stone, and the carvings along the walls flared with sudden bright gold. The shadows recoiled, hissing the spirit, distorted, shifting its form. Momentarily losing shape, the doctor then looked at Nia and told her she must speak. He said the spirit needed to hear the voice of the mother because only a mother's spirit could challenge the pact. Nia rose, her legs weak, but her fear swallowed by fierce love. She stepped forward, though. Irumba warned her to keep a little distance. She looked at the white-haired figure whose hollow gaze fixed on Ebony like a predator guarding prey. Nia called out with trembling voice, saying the child was hers, saying no spirit would take her, saying the blood of her ancestors stood behind her. The spirit turned, its hollow gaze toward Nia, its voice rising. Like cracking stone, it said, a mother's love meant nothing against mountain blood, it said. Mila had offered the child on the dawn of a sacred day, tying the spirit's essence into the girl's dreams. It said the child belonged to the ancient wind that lived in the mountain shadow, the wind that had no body, no shape, no breath, but craved the warmth of the living. Nia shook her head, tears burning her eyes. She stepped closer to Ebony, reaching for her daughter's hand. Though she did not touch, she whispered to Ebony, saying she was strong, saying she could fight, saying no spirit would take her soul. The spirit moved closer, its form towering, the mist swirling around it, thick and suffocating, its long fingers reaching toward Nia, this time not for the child, but for the mother. The ancient doctor stepped between them, his staff glowing brighter than firelight. He chanted words that felt heavy and powerful, the kind that carried the weight of whole generations. The spirit recoiled, its form flickering, the mist around it swirling wildly. The doctor said he would now reveal the deepest part of the pact, and Nia must be ready. He said Mala had not chosen Ebony by accident, he said. Mala had taken the last root of the Forbidden Mountain herb, one that held a spirit trapped for centuries. He said the spirit needed a vessel, but it could not bind to someone who carried tainted memory or a broken lineage. It could only bind to a child whose heart was pure, whose dreams were untouched by sorrow. The valley shook, a deep echo vibrating through the ground, as though the earth mourned for what had been set in motion. The doctor said Mala had chosen Ebony because she carried the purest line of their clan, untouched by darkness. He said the spirit desired her because she had the strongest light, and that light could hold the mountain spirit for many lifetimes. Nia felt a scream rising in her chest, but her voice died as Ebony suddenly lifted her head, her eyes wide, but not seeing her voice. Soft but not her own, she whispered, "The mountain woman is inside. My dreams, she wants my heartbeat." Nia reached forward, but the healer pulled her back, reminding her she must not touch the child until the ritual shifted. The spirit laughed a cold echo that scraped at the edges of the hollow. The ground split further, the golden light dimming as though the spirit drained the strength of the valley. The doctor closed his eyes, whispering that the unveiling was almost complete, but what came next would be far more dangerous. He said the spirit would try to break the valley and force its claim, he said. Nia must decide whether she would stand or fall, because the next stage required the strength of her spirit as well. The wind twisted through the hollow, though the valley had no wind. Shadows gathered around the spirit, swirling, rising, forming faces twisted in silent screams. The spirit expanded its form, growing taller, its white hair lifting like smoke. A deep rumble echoed from its chest, though it had no breath. It said Nia could not save the child unless she offered something of equal value. It said all pacts required balance. It said to take the child back, Nia must give something in return. Nia felt frozen. Irumba gasped. The doctor tightened his grip on the staff, his blue glowing eyes narrowing. The spirit drifted closer, gliding across the stone, its hollow gaze locking onto Nia. It said she must offer memory or years or blood. It said she must choose something hers, something valuable, something deep, something that would weaken her forever. The hollow fell silent as was. Nia stared at the spirit, her voice trembling. She asked what Mala had offered. The spirit answered. She gave the memory of her mother's face. She gave the warmth of her childhood. She gave the part of her heart that once felt love. Nia felt tears fall. She realized Mala had become hollow because she had carved out her own warmth to gain power, and in doing so she lost her humanity. The doctor stepped between them again. He said the spirit demanded too much. He said no mother needed to sacrifice her soul for her child. He said they would find another way, but the spirit let out a high piercing sound, the air around them shuddering, the cracks in the ground widened and faint black mist rose from them. The doctor called Nia to him. He said the child resisted on her own, but her strength was fading. He said they must begin the breaking ritual before the spirit grew too strong. He said the breaking ritual would draw the spirit closer, weaken its form, and try to sever the bond. But he warned that during the ritual, Ebony would feel everything. The spirit felt the pain, the hunger, the rage. Nia felt her heart tear, but she nodded, saying she would do whatever needed. The doctor placed Ebony at the center of the stone platform, drawing symbols with the sacred mixture around her. The glowing light encircled the child, forming a barrier that trembled like a living thing. Irumba stood behind Nia, gripping her shoulders, whispering strength into her ears. The doctor raised his staff. The carvings in the walls blazed with blinding gold. The ground pulsed like a heartbeat. The air turned cold enough to sting the skin. The spirit surged forward, letting out a roar of fury as the light pushed against it. Its form bent, twisted, fighting the valley itself. Ebony screamed as the power within her fought to hold on. Nia screamed her daughter's name, her voice raw, her spirit breaking, and yet she did not move. She whispered to her daughter, saying she was here, saying she would not let her go, saying the spirit would not win the breaking. Ritual began, tearing open the truth behind the pact, and the valley filled with a force so old it made the very air tremble. And what came next would push Nia into the darkest truth she had ever faced. The night rose like a wounded beast over the village, and the wind carried the low, trembling hum of the old spirits as the mother stepped into the sacred grove, with her daughter held close to her chest. The trees leaned inward as if listening to her heartbeat, and every branch shook with a warning she could not turn back. Now for the truth she had chased through fear, and shadow had reached its sharp edge, and there was no more hiding. The aunt stood in the clearing, her wrapper fluttering like the wings of a restless crow, her eyes glowing with a strange heat that pulsed with the same rhythm the daughter had felt whenever she swallowed the bitter pills. The mother felt her knees weaken, but she forced herself to keep moving because this was the moment everything had been pulling her toward. The drumming from the far hills rose suddenly as if the ancestors themselves were demanding that the lies be cut open so the truth could breathe. And in that ancient sound the daughter squeezed her mother's hand, her voice small but steady as she whispered that the spirits were close and watching. The air shook with a heavy pulse, and the aunt stepped forward, her breath thick with herbs, her voice weaving through the trees like a dark river. She said the pills were never meant for harm. They were meant to awaken the gift buried inside. The girl, the same gift their family had carried for generations. The mother felt a sharp twist in her chest, for she remembered stories whispered by elders about a bloodline touched by the wandering spirits. A bloodline marked by both blessing and danger. The daughter trembled as she confessed that each time she took the pills, she saw visions of women draped in blue light calling her into the forest, calling her to come and finish the path they started. The aunt claimed that the pills only opened the door, but the girl herself was the one the spirits wanted. The mother heard the words beating against her skin like hot stones, and she felt anger rising in her chest. But before she could answer, the wind twisted sharply in the trees, bent backward as a figure appeared at the edge of the clearing, an old woman made of dust and moonlight, her eyes deep like river caves, her voice like the oldest drum. The ancestors had arrived, and their presence filled the grove with a weight that made even the insects hush. The dust woman raised her hand, and the ground rippled under their feet. The mother wanted to run, but her daughter stepped forward as if pulled by an invisible cord. The aunt knelt, quickly pressing her forehead to the earth. The dust woman spoke of choices that shape the rivers of generations, choices that heal or break the chain of legacy. She said the girl carried a path meant only for the brave, and the mother must decide if she would hold her daughter back or let her step into her own destiny. The mother cried out in fear and begged the spirits to leave her child in peace, but the dust woman only shook her head, for peace was not what the girl was born for. The girl was born to mend what had been broken long ago, to bring balance to the wandering spirits who had lost their way. The drumming from the hills grew louder, faster, like thunder shaking the bones of the earth, and light burst from the daughter's chest, not burning, but soft like the glow of fireflies rising at dusk. The mother felt the air move through her in a warm wave, and she heard her daughter's voice layered with the voices of many before her, voices of ancestors, warriors, queens, healers, all flowing through her like a river of memory. The aunt lifted her head, tears streaming down her face as she whispered that the girl had finally awakened, and the dust woman stepped closer, touching the daughter's forehead. The light grew brighter, filling the entire grove until the trees seemed made of gold and the soil hummed with ancient songs. The mother reached out, trying to pull her daughter back, but her hand passed through the light as if through warm water, and she fell to her knees, sobbing. The dust woman said the time had come for the daughter to walk the path of spirit healing, and the mother could not walk it with her, only witness it, only bless it. But the daughter turned suddenly, her eyes still glowing, but her voice her own. She said she did not want to leave her mother. She said she only wanted to stop taking the pills because something inside felt wrong. Something felt twisted around her gift like vines choking a young tree. The dust woman frowned and stretched her hand toward the aunt, asking what she had hidden. The aunt trembled, her voice shaking like dry leaves, as she confessed that she feared the girl would surpass her, that she would carry a power stronger than any in their line. So she added a binding herb to the pills to slow the girl's awakening, not to harm, but to hold her back until the aunt herself was ready to guide her. The earth groaned as if wounded, and the dust woman rose, taller form expanding like a storm cloud. The grove thickened with shadows, the spirit's anger vibrating through the soil. The mother gasped, grabbing her daughter. Tightly the girl shivered as the light around her flickered. The ant crawled forward, begging for mercy as the spirits hissed. Through the air, the dust woman declared that the climax of truth had come, and the line would either be purified or destroyed by the mother's choice. The wind froze, the drumming stopped, every leaf held its breath, and the mother stood slowly, knowing that whatever she spoke next would change everything forever.